amazing people as Canadians. We should be literally up in arms over this kind of stuff. The social worker also asked the questions to the children about the care that they receive in their home, because you see, they're gathering information on houses, right? And you know, these computer records that are made every time a child or your grandchild is interrogated stay on computer forever. There is no legislation that allows for those records to be destroyed, people, okay? Does your mother make you breakfast? No, she doesn't. Social worker thought she was onto something really good here. She doesn't get up and make you breakfast before school? You go to school hungry? No, said the little girl. Well, if your mom's not making you breakfast, you're making yourself breakfast? No. Well, then how can you go to school not hungry? Well, my grandmother lives upstairs, so she makes us breakfast every morning. Anyway, to make this long story and the many stories that I can tell on this subject matter a little bit shorter, 4 days before Christmas, we try to get as many kids home through our advocacy division as possible, and we usually are pretty successful in getting a large amount home that have been apprehended, because if your kids get apprehended, it can take a year, 2 years to get them back, and that's if you're lucky. Anyway, we try every year to do this, and every year I promise myself I'm not going to do it because it's a killer as far as the emotions and the time commitment. Anyway, it was a Friday before, and I said, okay, that's it. We shut down. We didn't get out of the office till 4 o'clock in the morning. I get home. I decide, oh, great. Technically, holidays, 2 days, 3 days before Christmas holidays, right? Get my household all ready for Christmas. But so I didn't hit bed right away. I thought, oh, just slow down, get things done. So I finally get to bed about 7:30. The phone rings, and it's a pastor's wife, and she's in panic. Kari, they're coming to apprehend 4 children from a member of our congregation. So anyway, to make a long story even shorter than what this story could be drawn out to, they said to me, can you go over? And they lived about 20 minutes from my house, and I was in no mood to be diplomatic. So we went over there. I said to the family, look, do you have a tape recorder? Give me the lowdown on here. What's the family situation? I always tell families that come to us for help, I can deal with all the skeletons. It's the surprises I can't, so fess up now because I don't want to be here for a long time. Anyway, solid, just great family. The kind that you knew there was no issues here. It was just the ministry doing its thing. 2 social workers arrived, and just before they arrived, I said to the family, like, just let me do the talking, just sit down. Just before they came in, I said, oh, by the way, you're going to be taped. Oh, well, we don't know if we can do this then. I said, what are you denying? And I turned on the tape. I said, now, are you suggesting to me that what you have to say here shouldn't be recorded? Oh, no, that's okay. So we invited them in. And I said, now, what is the concern that you have over this family? Well, Kari, we can't really go into who told us. I said, I didn't ask you who told you. We kind of know that, and I appreciate the laws of confidentiality. See, people, the law changes when it comes to child protection in this province. You do not have the right to face your accuser. That information is confidential. Anyone can call and report you for abusing your child, and you have no right to know who that person is. It can be somebody who you miffed in a business deal, which if you get the Anna Rath case over on the table, will show you what can happen to your daughter in a circumstance like that. It can be an ex-lover, ex-spouse. It can be a relative who doesn't like you, or it could be a neighbor who's upset because we were playing drums till 12 o'clock at night. We don't know anywhere like that, do we? You have no right to face your accuser. You do not have the presumption of innocence till proven guilty either, because the very fact that they take your children, the very fact that they come into your home tells them that you're guilty. You have to prove yourself innocent. So the laws are all backwards when it comes to child protection. This is all under the Child, Family, and Community Services Act of British Columbia. Anyway, the social workers come in. I said, well, I didn't ask you who reported, and I just want to know what your concern is. She says, Kari, the children reported to us that an implement is used in their discipline, and that is excessive discipline. I said, an implement? Yes, an implement. I said, an implement being like a wooden spoon? Yes, an implement. And anyone who uses an implement, that is excessive discipline. I said, could you show me the law that says that? Yeah, the humane choice. Of course, they couldn't. I said, well, you know, last time I read Section 43, which is the provision in the criminal code that gives us parents and people in positions of trust the right to use reasonable force for the purposes of correction, doesn't give any restriction. It says basically if the punishment fits the crime and it's reasonable, then we have the ability not to be prosecuted under the law for raising our children. So she said, well, I don't care what the law says. This is our policy. I said to her, I said, you know, you're being taped, right? I said, I want, you know, I was being really nice. I said, look, you know, you sure you want to say that? You know, I said, so what you're suggesting is that you don't care what the federal law says that governs this entire nation. You're just concerned about the policy? She says, absolutely, that's our law. She says, all on tape, right? But that tells you the kind of caliber that we're dealing with here, mostly graduates out of the public education system. But you know, so I'm proving my point on and on here. Anyway, finally, I was, as I said, no mood to carry this on. And some of these little encounters, as fun and sporty as I do find them, and I have to say I sometimes do find them quite fun because it's just wonderful to see what these social workers get themselves into, especially when they're being taped. But I said, okay, so the issue here is the use of implement in you as a delegate of the director feel that there has been abuse because there's been excessive discipline, and anyone who would report to you knowledge that children were being disciplined with implements, you would have a duty to go and investigate. Is that right? She says, well, yes. I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, my 4 children, which are just 15 minutes from here, have knowledge of and have had the privilege of having an implement applied to their behinds. So I said, I want you to know, and I said, I'll give you a copy of this tape because you're getting a tape of this, that you have now just received a report of child abuse. And before you take this family's 4 children, you need to go and investigate and get mine. And I said, I don't think you probably want to do that, but you can try. You might give my kids a little bit of an adventure this morning. And they got so flustered, they stood up, they said, well, we're going to have to go and contact our supervisor. I said, that would probably be a very good idea for you to go and do that. Of course, they left, and we have never heard from them again. But I raise these issues because I think parents are unaware of what and how vulnerable they are with the state. They do not understand the proper application of law. They do what they are told, period. If they don't do what they're told, they lose their job, they lose their promotion, they lose their little empire. This is a $4 billion a year industry in this province alone, people. This is not about protecting children. This is about money. It's about public sector employment and government control. The more people on the public till, the more people in public sector employment, the more control the state has over all the rest of us because nobody will rise up and question them if their gravy train is cut off. It's a simple matter of economics. Lots of good people. I hear there's lots of good people in government. Yes, there is. But the question is, what good does good people do us if they have no character or courage of strength or courage to stand up and do what's right? Yeah. Nothing. So you see them all go. And then the line I always love is, well, I'll change it from the inside. Yeah, right. Number of fronts. The child protection law, and it applies to all of us whether we have children or not for a number of reasons. Number one, it's costing us huge amounts of money. Every child that's in the system justifies the hiring of judges, lawyers, so-called experts, professionals, court transcribers, court reporters, court recorders, sheriffs, foster parents, supervisors while the children are in foster care, umpteen zillion social workers. One child alone is usually responsible for about 16 positions within government or somebody attached to a government paycheck. This is what this is about. It is not about protecting children. In the early 1990s, we brought down the legislation. We created enough havoc after we finally decided to look at it, and it happened after the files got about 3 feet deep. We were doing the CARE program, one of the families who had been involved in the CARE program had 3 children apprehended out of a perfectly healthy situation, because the CARE program is not about the prevention of sexual abuse. What they told parents is about disclosure. So after children are told that your private parts are everything under a one-piece bathing suit, so that, and this is something you report to the teacher. Well, of course, we had reports going through the roof, and everything had a common denominator, this silly CARE program. When the CARE program was being taught in districts, the rates of reporting went way up. I got a little concerned over that, knowing quite a bit about the program and knowing that it was, a recipe for disaster not only within families, but for confusing children. So I stupidly called the ministry just to see what their techniques were or their understanding of the program when investigating reports that were directly related to the use of the CARE program. When I called the ministry and talked to one of the head honchos there, they said, "Kari, children don't lie about these kinds of things." And I said, "What, about being poked in the tummy?" Well, if they think that, they wouldn't report that unless there was something more. Well, one-piece bathing suit, sorry, on a little girl, to me, my girls, their favorite playing trick was, just zoom, and you get them, right? Well, that would have been abuse under this program that they were supposed to report to a teacher. So we had all of this reporting. Finally, even a judge said, when this program's in this district, rates of abuse go up 5%, right? The reporting just goes up 5 times, rather, not 5%, 5 times what it normally is, without any greater rate of prosecution. So we had a lot of false reporting going on. So once I found out that the state didn't want to understand that there could be disastrous repercussions for this bizarre program that was making lots of money for the person who designed this glossy thing, got people making decisions in emotion rather than understanding the issues, we went and did a research project into it. So I called my staff. I said, somebody get me the child protection law. When I read the legislation, a piece of legislation that gives the state godlike autonomy without an ounce of accountability, we all have a big problem, people. Anything that doesn't allow you to hold the government responsible is problematic. This had just come into your home, take your sleeping child, which always seems to be 10 o'clock on a Friday night for the majority of apprehensions that we're involved in. This is what's going on. Now, you say, but wait a minute, shouldn't there be criteria that tells us when the state has the right to come in? Well, let me tell you what the law says. This is the criteria for apprehension in this province. If a child is likely to be physically harmed by a parent. I have 4 children. They're always likely to be physically harmed. It's just the way it is. I'm always likely to be physically harmed by my kids too, especially when you start using the definitions of what physical harm is. Probably the most scary one in this law is the one that says if a child is emotionally harmed by a parent's conduct. Again, now my children are not that little anymore. They're 12, 14, 16, and just turned 19. But, when my eldest was 14, I thought it was my duty to emotionally harm them as teenagers, especially when they want to do things that are not necessarily in their interest. Oh, Mom, I'll just die if I can't go to the movies with my friends, Yes, consider yourself emotionally harmed, but no, you cannot go, This is, and of course we have do-gooding social workers who by and large don't have any children of their own that are willing to believe whatever tale a child tells. And I can assure you, when I was 14, I was no angel. Yeah, hard to believe. I know. Use your imaginations. Go wild, people, Now, I was not, the easiest child. My mom reminds me often and, in loud terms about what kind of teenager I was. I tell her that's okay. It was just her character development. She needed someone to keep her life exciting. But under this definition, if I was a child today, I would have the National Guard up from the United States on my parents' door. Especially when they gave me a very long overdue one when I was 14. I won't tell you the crime I committed, but I think if it were one of my children, they would have got more than the long overdue one. But we have changed, we've usurped the role of the parent in the child, and the state is becoming the bigger enabler for that child to go in directions that are not necessarily their own good. We heard about the vaccinations earlier today. We had the Citizens Research Institute was the ones that took the government to court when they wanted to take away the rights of parents to control medical services to their children. Are you aware of the Infants Act? How many people know about the Infants Act in this province? Not enough. As parents, you have no right to govern the medical services given to your children. The NDP government took that right away from you. Your children can go and get whatever kind of medical service operation, whatever they want, without your knowledge or your consent. This is, yeah, I know that's what everybody says, what? This is a letter that went out to all superintendents from the Deputy Minister of Education on vaccinations, and I'll just give you an example, not only of the propaganda that goes out, but how far they're taking this. And a couple reasons why they brought this legislation in. Again, it's the divide and conquer. Create instability, give children the autonomy, take away the parental influence. Our decision-making processes are governed by one thing, and that's the best interest of children. Everybody else, medically speaking, who has an interest in our children has a financial attachment to that interest. In other words, they're making a profit from any services they give our children. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether it's birth control, vasectomies, abortions, sex change operations, your kids can go and get those things without your knowledge. We have had school counselors take girls for abortions without even telling their parents. Okay? In this province. Anyway, there's a couple of things about what I'm going to read here, and this is over on the table there. It's under, it's the Infants Act one. There's a little boy about injections or something. But this is a memo right out on government letterhead. And I won't read the whole thing, but this is when they were doing the measles vaccination, right? They claimed a new epidemic of measles, even though there wasn't anything to support it. But suddenly they had to re-inject everybody with the measles vaccination. But, okay, before we get into the absurdity of what they've done here and the violation of the relationship between the state and the citizenry, listen to the nonsense that this is how they get school personnel on board with them. Although approximately 95% of the population, okay, 95% of the population now receives a measles vaccination shortly after their first birthday, this vaccination is effective for about only 90 to 95%. Now, okay, look at the language that they use, okay? This vaccination is effective for about only. Now, when you hear the words about only, your mind automatically goes to something below 40%, right? This is the power of suggestion, words, and how you want to frame it. But they do put in for about only 90 to 95% of children. Now, if we're talking about effective rates, 90 to 95% is pretty damn good, I would say. Currently, about 15% of the population is considered at risk. Now, this goes to the lack of ability to add in the public education system. We have 90 to 95% that are okay, but now we have 15% at risk. So I don't know where we gained a little there, but anyway, it's just BC education, so we won't be too hard on them. Currently, about 15% of the population is considered at risk of contracting the disease, which is highly infectious and can lead to brain damage or even death. Now, think about what all these teachers are doing and the school principals when they're reading this. Okay, now these are people that have been conditioned to remain in a system. These are not outside the box thinkers by and large, because they stay in a system where everything's controlled for them. The curriculum's provided. They're given workshops if they can't get creative on their own, okay? This is very much, we won't go beyond. So here they are, able, and I told them I would not do that, being chastised. But now they've brought this discussion now to an emotional level, not even logical. Somebody's going to die if we don't do this, right? We heard from Edda and about how they put the propaganda here. Because large outbreaks occur every 7 to 10 years, it is expected that significant outbreaks will occur in British Columbia. Okay, We have no evidence that there's even an outbreak, but we have evidence that it could be expected, right? Expected, not happening. British Columbia's last outbreak was in 1986, and of course they don't give the figures on how many there. This one-time catch-up vaccination program will ensure that nearly all British Columbia children and youth are protected. Again, remember who the target audience is. Teachers. Teachers have a heart for children. They are the children's saviors. This is important, okay? In the future, children will receive 2 vaccinations before they are 2 years old. Aren't we lucky? And so will not require measles vaccination after they begin school. Now this gets to the relationship of the state and the citizenry. Public education has become an arm of the state, not an arm of the family. That's why we have the problems we do. In a direct quote, "You should be aware that some parents oppose vaccinations and may refuse to consent to the immunization of their child. Schools will be asked to ensure parents receive consent cards, which will be provided by the public health unit in your area." That's nice, right? Just when you thought it was okay. However, if parental consent is refused, a child may choose to be immunized if he or she signs the consent card and is defined as being a mature minor under the terms of the British Columbia Ministry of Health Public Nursing Standards, blah, blah, blah. Now, we all go, but wait a minute, they have to be a mature minor, right? You know what mature minor is defined as? The subjective opinion of a public health nurse, as far as the child recognizing the benefits and risks. Now, we know what public health nurse view as far as immunizations, the benefits and the risks, and there are no risks according to them. So there's direct usurping of the role of the parent, the protector with children. And it's also there's 2 things to this that I want to touch on. If a child is old enough to consent, because they're basically saying that they have the same relationship with a physician or a doctor or a medical practitioner as we as adults do, we can also consent, but we can also refuse consent. How many of those children, because they're on that same legal contract with those healthcare providers, how many of those children, when they said, "No, I don't want the shot," were respected? I suggest to you, none of them. We probably had a lot of illegal happenings going on there. In Tsawwassen, any child who received the shot got a coupon from Big Mac for a hamburger at McDonald's. There's lots of issues. These handouts are over there, and I want you to get them. We continue to help with the apprehension of children for a number of reasons. The court system that oversees children in care is very concerning because it is not a level playing field for families. They go in there thinking that justice is going to be done, that truth will prevail, and of course it just isn't that way. There's a number of stories there that will tell you that. Many of you may have seen the duffel bag baby case, Jennifer Bertrand, who went into hiding. This past, just a year ago, we've been battling that case. She had 2 children already in care, got pregnant with the 3rd while the others were in the court process. 2 years before the court, still no decision because they're so backlogged. In the meantime, she became pregnant with baby number 3. That's when she called us. She was very concerned that they would apprehend that child. I asked her to get in touch with the ministry, get it in writing, that what their intentions were. The Kelowna office, which was the problematic office in this case, assured her that the decision-making process would be left to the Surrey office because they were living in Surrey. Every week, this family traveled up to Kelowna from Surrey to visit the 2 boys that were in care at the expense of the taxpayers. This is what happens. It's an industry, and the more services they can provide, the more legitimate itemizing they can do for your tax bill. Anyway, finally when the baby came, Murphy's Law being what it is, she went into labor while in Kelowna. We all had said, Jen, have the baby down in the Lower Mainland, but babies tend to come when they come. So she, rather than delivered in Kelowna, traveled all the way to Vernon to have the baby in hard labor. Had the baby, 9 pounds, 6 ounce, huge baby. Baby was healthy and fine. Vernon Hospital said, look, you don't even have to stay here. You can be discharged. Came back to Kelowna. That night, while they had her husband and mom had gone to visit the other boys, 9 o'clock that night, 3 armed RCMP officers knocked at the hotel door. Social worker yelling in the hall, give me the baby, give me the baby. A ruckus ensued. Fortunately, Jen at that point knew that if she gave the baby up at that point, she would not see the baby again. It would take at least a year to get the court processes through again, and you've lost whatever bonding ability you had. She refused to let go of the child. She called me. We were able to get lawyers. We were able to create enough problems with the RCMP that they knew they had enough trouble then. So the decision was made that instead of apprehending the baby that night, that they would wait and try to get a court order. Now, under the Act, that is what's supposed to be happening. If you're denied access to a child, as a social worker, you're to go and get a court order. They don't play by those rules. Parents don't know their rights. Social workers don't even know the law. The child and mother were placed, this was the compromise till Monday, this was a Saturday night, that they would stay at Kelowna General Hospital. So they opened up a bed. There was obviously a guardian angel watching over, because when they got to the hospital, the social worker changed the deal. Suddenly, the baby would stay at Kelowna. Mom wouldn't be able to stay at Kelowna. Fortunately, someone in administration at Kelowna Hospital said, we won't do that. She said, the baby's been out, can't go in the nursery, has to stay with mom. Whether that's accurate or not, I'm not sure, but it sure worked for me. So the whole darn family was given a private room. The baby was there. Sunday night came. We had a number of telephone calls back and forth, and it was very clear that this family had no confidence whatsoever in this ministry, and I think legitimately so. We received a call saying, Kari, would we pick them up? And I said, they haven't apprehended that baby yet? And she said, no. And I said, fine. We did a midnight run to Merritt. Grandma put the baby in a duffel bag and walked out of the hospital. We bought ourselves a couple hours time by leaving mom there with a towel wrapped up, pretending to be the baby when the nurses came in to check, because we had to make sure we got at least on this side of the Coquihalla so that we could put them underground. And they stayed there for 6 months, traveling around. Once they go underground, I don't have any knowledge of where they are, because they tried to arrest me all the time, and they send RCMP officers over by my house, and you know, it's just all in a day for us. But as a result, Jen and baby Aiden have a very connected life. He's just a huge, wonderful baby. Fortunately, we were able to put enough media attention on this to make sure that the judge did what was right, and sometimes that's what needs to be done in these cases too. But I want to talk a little bit more about the legal process with this case, because some very interesting things happen, and I appreciate very much, I smiled there listening to Hughes's talk, because we believe very much in taking everybody to task as well, and we've done that, and it's been very successful for us and very lucrative for us, especially with the lawsuits nowadays. But that was, it doesn't pay to be nice, I have decided. And I got calls from the senior media people when we started taking the newspapers to task, saying thank you for doing what you're doing. And I found that really busy. I said, Kari, this politically correct nonsense is out of control, and the only thing that's going to give me the power as the boss, this is one of the large Southern papers, the only thing that's going to give me power as a boss is to say, you can't say that because we're going to get sued, because Kari's going to sue you, and I don't want that kind of nonsense. So it has some very interesting effects. But in this particular case, there was a lot of antics that were happened. After the baby went into the underground, of course, the RCMP start harassing everybody, and they arrived, they called me up one morning, and they were down, I've got about a very long driveway down with gates at the bottom, and they were down there, so you have to buzz into my house, and he says, Kari, this is Constable Corey, somebody or other, and we just like to come up and have a chat with you. And I said, well, that would be fine. I said, do you have that piece of paper? Well, what kind of piece of paper? I said, that search warrant thing, because I'd sure love to talk to you if you got one of those. He says, well, Ms. Simpson, we don't have one of those. We were hoping that wasn't necessary. I said, well, why wouldn't it be necessary? See, because we have been so conditioned as Canadians to accommodate the authorities at every turn. We need to keep that relationship, if nothing else, for our own protection. Okay? So he's hanging out at the bottom of my driveway, and it was just towards the end of school, and my daughter had final exams, and her boyfriend was picking her up. So I said, honey, come on, I'll walk you down to the bottom of the driveway there. So we walked down, and I put her in the car, and I say hi to her boyfriend, have a good day, go do good at your school. This is just my kids are kind of used to this kind of stuff, but anyway, so I had grabbed the camera, and of course there's the officer parked right down at my driveway, so I start taking pictures of him and go up to the window and say, now Officer, Constable Corey, I said, you're still here. I said, this is wasting a lot of good money, isn't it? He says, well, just doing some book work here, Ms. Simpson. And he said, I thought you said you had to go to work. And I'm still taking pictures. Matter of fact, one of the pictures was featured on BCTV. It was so great. It got his car, his license plate, RCMP, and my house in the background. It was just perfectly framed. One of those times you actually look like you know what you're doing, right? And he says, well, I thought you had to go work. I said, well, I did have to go to work early, Constable, but when I called the TV crew that was meeting me there and told them you were here, they thought they'd come on over here. And I said, so just BCTV's coming, so don't hurry. Please stay here, right? So he talked a little bit more. He was a little bit nervous now. And I said, can I just see the instructions they gave? Well, of course, the RCMP were lied to by the Ministry of Children and Families. They were told that this woman was drug addicted, intravenous drug user, all the lies necessary to mobilize them to do what they need to do. He says, well, Kari, I need to ask you if you know where this baby is. I said, well, you can ask me. I said, but, I really can't help you on those fronts. I said, we've done this enough to know. The people that provide the underground don't tell me. I couldn't find out if I wanted to. Anyway, so he took off pretty quick after that, and BCTV was happy to feature him on the news that evening. But I traveled up to Kelowna for this case, and again, it's very